live for another episode of the Visto Show. It's been a while. Don't worry, I'm going to fill you in on where the heck I have been. It is Friday, December the 15th. We're halfway through December. We have 2 weeks left of 2023. How the heck are you? How's everybody doing on this fine Friday? Feel free to give a quick hello. Let me know how things are going. Let me know where you're tuning in from in the chat. Hope everything is going well. As most of you know, I go live every 2 weeks to review the most recent immigration news, updates, exciting events, share my opinion, hear your opinions, discuss those opinions, and all that kind of fun stuff. So hopefully you've had a good few weeks. Let me know in the chat if you can hear me, see me okay. If you're watching on YouTube after the fact, you should definitely make sure to be following me on LinkedIn so that you can tune in live. When you tune in live, you can comment, you can chat with me, you can share your opinions, all that kind of stuff. So it's just a little bit more fun. Anyways, thanks everybody for tuning in. What we're going to talk about today, I will jump right into it. Me on LinkedIn is a couple things. Number one, I'll give you just a quick personal update, right? Because I actually haven't been live for about a month. I'll give you a quick personal update on where I've been and what I've been up to. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do an express entry catch-up. Now, there actually weren't that many express entry draws over the last month and a half, but we're going to do an update because last week they did 3 draws back to back to back. So we're going to go over the details, and we're also going to talk about our thoughts on express entry, whether it's done or not for 2023, what to expect for 2024, all that fun stuff. And then what we're going to talk about is the recent revised requirements of the proof of funds for international students to Canada, right? They more than doubled the proof of funds requirement. So we're going to dig into the details, and more importantly, we're going to share our thoughts. Was this a good change? Was it not a good change? Does it make sense? How is it going to affect the international student industry and business and life in Canada? And then we'll just give you a quick Visto wrap-up before we head to, I usually stick around for a Q&A if anyone has questions at the end. So anyways, and then we'll head out and we'll get back to our Fridays. So again, thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm going to jump right into it. By all means, if you want to chime in on the conversation, if you have any thoughts, opinions, you want to let me know what you think on the on anything that I'm talking about, by all means. So anyways, feel free to, this continues to unmute and such. Anyways, okay, so let's jump in. First and foremost, where the heck was I? I haven't been live in about a month because I got married on November the 18th, which means that whole weekend was a write-off, right, in terms of work, not in terms of personal life, but in terms of work, that whole weekend was pretty much a write-off, right? Preparing the event, spending time with family, your head's not really in a place to be working, and then went on a 2-week honeymoon to Belize. Hence, I did not go live on LinkedIn because I didn't want to be honest. So that's where I've kind of been. Got back in action about a week and a half ago. If you've never been to Belize, I would highly recommend it. Great country, great people, friendly people, good food, good weather, all that fun stuff. Good snorkeling as well, which I'm not exactly a huge water or swimming person. I do like going in the ocean and so forth, but really good snorkeling, and we had a really good time. So that's where I've been. Back to normal, although things will obviously quiet down a little bit for the holidays, but I will be back to my regularly scheduled, Visto show, usually every 2 weeks, and posting relatively regularly on LinkedIn as well. So that's it for number one, kind of where I was. Let's talk about express entry. And what I'm going to do is, as I usually do, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to pull up the IRCC page showing the draws, and I'm going to take a quick sip of water as I segue into express entry. Okay, so you'll see here, the first thing I want to point out, even before the most recent draws, there were no draws in November, right? There was a round of 3 draws at the end of October. There was one early October. And then apparently I was away for most of this, so I did follow up on the world a little bit while I was gone. But apparently there was an issue with the express entry portal because IRCC added the ability, or the requirement, I should say, to include postal codes in some addresses, right? For example, for your work history or your mailing address, blah, 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 right? The ability to add your postal code. For some reason, that basically brought the entire Express Entry platform to its knees, and IRCC had major problems, and they couldn't, I don't know, right? I don't know what the heck happened, but it was bad enough that there was no draws in all of November. Now, what happens when there's no draws? It means that the score requirements usually go up, right? Because the amount of people who are waiting in the Express Entry pool continues to grow. So what happened then in December, and I'll highlight the December draws right here, is we had 3 draws, right? December 6th, 7th, and 8th. And they were quite large because probably making up for the lack of draws in November, right? So we can see here, December 6th, there was an all-program draw. It's weird because they called it general. I don't know if anyone else noticed this, but typically they call it no program specified. But they called it general on December 6th. I don't know, maybe I'm reading into this a little bit too much, but I don't think they've ever called it general before. Maybe they're just using new terminology now that they're doing the industry specific. But look, if we go back years and years and years, again, I don't know, am I the only person who noticed this? They always call them no program specified. And for some reason for December 6th, they call it general. I don't really know why. I don't know if this even matters, right? It probably doesn't matter, to be honest. But yeah, for some reason, it's called general. Nazar says, congratulations, Josh. Thank you very much, Nazar. Appreciate it. I appreciate the kind words. So, yeah, I don't know why, if it's like, again, something important or not, but they're calling it general now. Anyways, they invited 4,750 people to apply. Minimum score requirement, 561 for an all-program draw. That is very, very high, right, for an all-program draw. Understandably, because they hadn't done a draw in, almost a month and a half. But just to give people an idea of the rough range of the score requirements that might be required if you are applying for Express Entry, and especially if you don't fall under one of the industry-specific draws, right? So a little bit concerning, especially if, like I said, if you're looking at Express Entry and you don't fall under one of those industry specifics. Now, even still, let's look at the draw December 7th. French language proficiency. 1,000 people invited to apply. Minimum score requirement of 470. A few months ago, if you were eligible for one of these industry-specific draws, it meant that the score requirement was much lower, right? French language here, oh no, it was 486. Okay, never mind. That was pretty high. But you expect that they're pretty, I guess it depends, right? French seems to be relatively high, whereas like agricultural, for example, seems to be a little bit lower. Transport occupations, a little bit lower. But anyways, French language proficiency with a score requirement of 470. And then STEM occupations, they invited 5,900 people to apply, and still the minimum score requirement was 481. That is like pretty high for a industry-specific draw of this size, right? 5,900 people is a lot of people. It's a relatively large draw, right? If we look back at the draws for the last six-ish months, it looks like it's actually the biggest draw. Yeah, 5,900 is the biggest draw of the last 6 months. So anyways, what is this to say? Number one, they were playing a little bit of catch-up, right? Because they hadn't done a draw in November. But Express Entry is really changing, right? In the sense that the score requirements are just that much higher, right? So keep this in mind. Is this going to be the last draw of 2023? I don't know, right? Nobody knows. I wouldn't be surprised if they did another draw at the 2 weeks from the 6th. So that would be the December 26th. Maybe we'll see another 1 or 2 or 3 draws. I don't know, right? Nobody really knows, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw one more. And then it'll be interesting to see what happens into 2024, right? Probably what we will see, if I can make a guess, is we'll continue to see like this pattern, right? Where every 2 weeks they're doing like an all program draw plus 1 or 2 industry specific draws. And then 2 weeks later, an all program draw and then 1 or 2 industry specific draws. But time will tell, right? As I've said before, express entry has become probably as difficult as ever to try and plan for, right? We really can't see many patterns, and we really don't know what IRCC may or may not be doing. So it's become more and more difficult to plan for, unfortunately. Anyways, let me know what you think. If you have any thoughts in the comments, do you agree? Do you disagree? Where do you think express entry is going? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? And we will move on to the next topic. Now, what is the next topic, you may ask? Good question. We're going to talk about, this is big news, right? And this kind of happened while I was gone, and I've been excited to catch up on it ever since. But what happened about a week ago now is IRCC made the decision to raise the minimum proof of funds requirements for the study permit, right? So I'm going to take one more sip of water before I segue into this big topic with lots of interesting analysis and opinions to come. Okay, let me share my screen. Now I'm going to send links. I'm going to put links in the comments here. I'll put the link for the express entry draws, number 1. And then number 2, I'm going to share this link to the official IRCC announcement, just in case you would like to follow along. I'll put that in the comments if you're tuning in on LinkedIn, and I will put this in the description below if you are watching this on YouTube, so you can actually, again, pull it up and follow along. So anyways, let's quickly skim through this. I'm not going to read everything word for word. You can if you want, right? Like it's a lot of text, right? You can look through it, of course, if you want. But basically what they're saying is, you know, the first paragraph's always a bunch of, you know, big text mumbo jumbo. And then usually the second or third paragraph we get into it. So anyways, IRCC announced that starting January 1st, so keep in mind, this doesn't apply until January 1st, right? So now's a good time to apply for a study permit. The cost of living requirement for study permit applicants will be raised so that international students are financially prepared for life in Canada. Moving forward, this threshold will be adjusted each year, right? So this number has not changed in a long time, right? The 10K that's required for international students, that number has not changed in a long time. Now they're saying that they're going to adjust it every year. When Statistic Canada updates the low income cutoff, LICO presents the minimum income necessary to ensure that an individual does not have to spend a greater than average portion of income on necessities. Cost of living requirement for study permit applicants has not changed since the early 2000s when it was set at 10K. As such, it hasn't kept up with cost of living, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so for 2024, starting January 1st, a single applicant will need to show that they have $20,635, representing 75% of LICO, in addition to their first year of tuition and travel. This change will apply to new study permit applications received on or after January 1st. So one thing of note is that's for a single applicant, right? So you're probably going to need to include even more if you're including a spouse or common law partner or children, right? Which is very common. Right now, I believe it's an extra $4,000 for a spouse and then an extra $3,000 for every child thereafter, right? So if you're applying with a spouse, it might be, if they keep these numbers the same, it might be $24,635. If you're applying with a spouse and a kid, it might be $27,635, right? Now, this is a significant boost, right? Having to show in your savings or wherever $10,000 as opposed to over $20,000. That's a big change, right? So what I'm seeing now, especially from like our clients that use Visto, is a lot of firms are getting an influx of international students who are saying, hey, we want to apply right now before January 1st so that we only have to show 10 instead of 20, right? Which is a big difference. So keep that in mind. While this will help prevent student vulnerability and exploitation, we recognize that the impact of the change could vary depending on the applicant. Next year, in collaboration with partners, we intend to implement targeted pilots that will test new ideas aimed at helping underrepresented cohorts of international students. Okay, yeah, I'll be curious to see what that is. It's a little bit vague. What do they mean by underrepresented cohorts? Like, is this basically countries where they're not receiving as high of a volume? I don't know. Today's announcement follows important reforms to the international student announced on October regarding the development of a new framework to recognize learning institutions. Yeah, so basically, like, I think this is a good change, right? We could absolutely have the debate about how fair it is or how not fair it is, or, you know, how much money, you know, how it's, you know, it's so much money. But here's one of the problems I think it solves is right now, like 10K is just not that much money in Canada, right? Whether it is in your country or other countries or not, that's for another conversation, right? If you're going to move to Toronto or you're going to move to Vancouver, $10,000 is not going to get you very far at all, right? Especially if you're looking for like a 1 or a 2 bedroom. I understand a lot of international students don't, right? They go split with 3, 4, 5 other people. Part of it is because they don't have a choice, right? But the reality is this. If we go look up, you know, IRPA, right, like the rules and regulations, or the real way the study permit program is designed, it's for you to come and study as a full-time student and work part-time if you want to be able to help support yourself. And what the problem with that is, especially if you're moving to some of these major cities, $10,000 just doesn't get you very far. So what happens? Students turn to working illegally under the table, or dropping out of school and getting a full-time job, or, you know, all these things that was not the design of the program. The other problem is that because this number 10K is relatively low, I'm not saying 10K is cheap, right? I'm not saying, hey, we're all, you know, running around with 10K in our pockets. But I'm saying because that number is relatively low, it's easy for these unscrupulous agents and scammers and fraudsters to sell dreams to the students and say, oh yeah, you only need 10K here, let me help you get a letter from your uncle giving you 10K so I can get you to Canada. You know what I mean? And it doesn't reflect the reality of the cost of living and how important of a decision this should be, right? This shouldn't be, oh, let's go get a 10K gift from your uncle and send you to Canada, right? Especially with rising cost of living, rising cost of housing specifically, right? So I think by raising this requirement a little bit, not only is it, well, a little bit, doubling it, not only is it more reflective of the money that students should actually have in order to make this a good experience, but it will hopefully detract or make more students think twice about whether this is the right decision and look deeper into whether they can make this work or not financially, and push them towards using more reputable sources and partners and service providers. You know what I mean? So I think it kind of has that duality of benefit, in my opinion. Now, is this going to affect the number of students that are going to apply? 100%. But that's probably what they wanted as well, right? The number of international students and study permit approvals over the last 7-8 years has just ballooned like crazy. I think like around 2015, there was something like 150,000 study permits approved. And now there's like 600,000 study permits being approved a year. So it's gotten out of control. The spam, the fraud, like you can't even imagine, right, what's going on in this industry. So I think, number one, it's a good idea because it more reflects the cost of living in Canada, which is why they even created the program the way that they did. And number two, I think it has that duality potential where it could actually protect students in a weird way, right? And they are kind of alluding to it here, right? They said, what did they say? Prevent student vulnerability and exploitation, both in their home country and when they land in Canada, right? Because what happens is you land in Canada, you run out of money, now you have to turn to illegal or, you know, under the table activities, and that's not good. Anna asked, do you think that Quebec will do the same? I don't know, Anna. That's a good question. I'm not sure. Quebec is kind of like its own little bubble, right? I mean, if you saw the Visto show, what was it, maybe a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, I covered the story where Quebec has increased tuition for students that don't speak French and are going to English-speaking, universities in Canada, even if you're Canadian, right? So even if you're a Canadian student, let's say me, right? I live in Toronto, I want to go study in English at McGill. They're going to triple my tuition just because I'm going to study at an English program. So Quebec's, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have a finger on the pulse as well at Quebec, Anna. It's a good question. And I don't love the way they run their immigration, in full transparency, but it'll be interesting to see what they do accordingly. So where were we? We expect learning. Okay. Recognize learning. We expect learning institutions to only accept the number of students that they can provide adequate support for, including housing options. I don't know if some of you have seen over the last month or two or three, there's been some huge stories of colleges who accept 2,000 students, and then like a month before the program starts, they tell 500 of them, sorry, we don't have room for you. You can no longer come, or you have to defer, right? So there's unscrupulous agents, there's fraudsters, there's scammers, and I also think that even some of the schools, reputable and unreputable schools, have gone unchecked for a little bit too long, and I think this will hopefully help reel it in a little bit. In welcoming students, we have a responsibility to make sure they are supported when they come to our country. We've prepared to take necessary measures, including limiting visas. So this was an interesting part as well. On the table, I don't think they're not going to do it yet, but they're not opposed to limiting the number of study permits to ensure that designated learning institutions provide adequate and sufficient support for students as part of the academic experience. It's imperative to work together. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think this is good. I actually think, and most of you who watch the Visto show often, you know that I have been pretty harsh on IRCC over the last year or two. There's plenty I could complain about. But I personally like this. I think it's a step in the right direction. I think this was needed to actually reflect the cost of living and to keep things more in line with the purpose of the study permit program. I think students, I think agents, I think professionals, I think schools should be held to a higher standard. And I think IRCC is saying, hey, listen, if you all aren't going to take this seriously, we're going to start limiting visas and we're going to start adding in these new requirements. I think it's great. I was very happy to hear it. Because what a lot of people don't realize is the international student industry is huge, right? There are so many people making so much money in this industry. The agents, the consultants, the lawyers, less so. Like I find on average, lawyers aren't doing as much study permit work. It's a lot of agents and consultants. And the schools, right? Some employers that get all the students as like part-time work. The country, right? Think of all the GDP that I think they say international students bring something like $22 billion to our economy every year, right? So I hope this is a little bit of a wake-up call to people who aren't navigating or treating international students properly. That's like, hey, if this continues to get out of hand, IRCC might start limiting study permits, which could have a huge effect on some of these study abroad agents, some of these colleges and universities, right? Could be huge. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. In order to achieve this result, it is imperative to work together with provincial and territorial governments, learning institutions, so we can ensure international students. Okay. 3 temporary policies affecting international students that were all set to expire. So the waiver on the 20-hour per week limit, number of hours they're allowed to work, will be extended to April 30th. So IRCC made an exemption where international students could work more than 20 hours per week while they're studying, and they're extending it through April. Be able to work. We continue to examine options for this policy in the future, such as expanding off-campus work hours for international students to 30 hours per week while class is in session. This is interesting. What do you guys think about this? I have mixed feelings. I personally don't mind the 20 hours per week because, as I said earlier, the way the study permit is set up right now is you're supposed to come to Canada and work full-time, right? You're not coming to Canada. This is as per the current rules and regs, right? Which can be changed, right? We can always change them. Well, I can't, but some people can change them. The way the program's designed right now is you're supposed to come to Canada and study full-time and work part-time to supplement your savings so that you can afford to live here. If we continue to let that number creep up, then number one, there's putting more pressure on students, right? If students are starting to work 30, 40 hours a week, how in the world are you supposed to work full-time and study full-time and get good grades, right? You're really, like, if we peel the onion back, in a perfect world, the students would come, they would have enough money, they can study full-time, commit all of their efforts and focus to studying full-time, and maybe work part-time to supplement their savings. But we want them to study, to learn, to graduate with a good degree so that they can get a good job and then start their career and grow in Canada. The problem is what this industry has turned into is we're pumping hundreds of thousands of students into programs that don't even add value without enough money to survive, so that they have to turn to all of this extra work, oftentimes under the table, and then they barely graduate from a course that's not even that valuable, and then they can't find a good career, so they can't progress and earn more money and buy a house and start a family, and then they end up going home, right? And we're starting to see that play out. And as I talked about earlier, it's harder to get PR. So express entry score requirements are higher. So especially if you don't find the right work, it's very hard to get PR, and then your PGWP expires, and then you start paying for LMIs illegally, right? So it's a vicious cycle, right? So that's my concern here. I think we should actually stick to the design of the program, which is let's bring legitimate, genuine international students to Canada who want to study in valuable programs that will fill labor shortages that we have. Let's make sure they actually have enough money so that they don't have to work more than 20 hours a week or 30 hours a week. They can focus on their graduation. They can focus on getting good grades and landing a job. And sure, they can work part-time, absolutely. But how in the world can you work full-time and study full-time? And not, be pushed over the edge or have a lot of stress or, have mental health issues, et cetera, especially when you're in a new country, right? You're starting fresh in a new country. So that's my opinion. What do you folks think? I don't like moving up the 20 hours a week. I think 20 hours per week for full-time students is a good number. And I think the only reason that students would need to work more than 20 hours a week is if they don't actually have enough money, partly because we're not requiring them to have enough money. If you land in Canada tomorrow, if you especially land in Toronto tomorrow to go study with $10K in your pocket, you're going to be broke in 6 months, right? Maybe 10 months if you're lucky. So we need to redesign the program, especially around the proof of funds, so we're bringing people for the right reasons and actually setting them up for success. That's my opinion. If you have any, please feel free to throw them down there as well. The other public policy, the facilitative measure that has allowed international students to count time spent studying online, as long as it constitutes less than 50%, will continue to be in place before September 1st. Okay, so basically for online studies. This measure will no longer apply to students who begin a program on or after that date. Distance learning facilitates or blah, blah, blah. I feel like this partly made sense during COVID, right? The online study. But like now that COVID's over, this just allows all these shady colleges to offer more online programs and not actually have to have a campus with classes, right? So that's my concern there. I don't know. I don't love this. I get it, the world's going more remote. And at its core, this is actually a good policy. The problem is that I think all the shady colleges that barely even have a campus can now get away with selling online programs to their students, right? So that's my concern. I don't know how much of that is happening or not, but that's my big concern with it. And hopefully, hopefully we can get over it and back to normal ASAP. The last one, in response to labor market disruptions, a temporary policy was introduced on 3 occasions to provide an additional 18-month work permit to post-graduation work permit holders. Foreign nationals with a post-graduation work permit expiring up to December 1st, 2023, remaining eligible to apply. I think this is okay. So basically, what this is saying is if you have a PGWP that's about to expire, you can apply for an additional 18-month extension, right? Open work permit. I think this is okay largely because of what's happening with express entry right now, which is, as I said earlier, it's harder than ever to get PR, but we have more students than ever graduating on PGWPs trying to find jobs, and it's harder than ever. So I think that for the next year or two, students will need this extra 18 months to get additional work experience, find their way towards PR, etc., etc. So that's what I think, and we'll see kind of like how that plays out down the road as well. Oh, I saw a comment come through, but the LinkedIn comment features are the LinkedIn Live comment functionality is partially broken. So Nazar, I saw that you commented, but now I can't pull up the comment for some reason. I'm not seeing it live here. I'm gonna try and pull it up on the left side of the screen. I don't know why it's not showing up. God damn. LinkedIn, can you please, if you're listening, I know you're not, can you please improve the LinkedIn Live? Half the time when I go live, I can't see comments as they're coming in live. I have to like go and refresh my screen and open it up in another tab. And it's not all that fun. Anyways, Nazar says, absolutely 100% I support and welcome this new change on cost of living for international students. Yeah, like I said, Nazar, I think a lot of us are in the same boat. We've seen the problems, all that kind of stuff. Something had to change. I think it's a good step in the right direction. So I will give IRCC kudos for that proof of funds change. And then the rest of it's kind of like quotes and stuff. Quick facts: international education accounts for more than 22 billion in economic activity annually. Yeah, so that's what I mentioned earlier. Greater than Canada's exports of auto parts, lumber, or aircraft, and supports more than 200,000 jobs in Canada. So that's the reason why it's such a shame. Is like, this is such an important industry to Canada, and it's basically gone to crap in the last year or two. And I hope that they can get it back into shape. I think it seems like they are trying to. This is a step in the right direction. And some of the things that the minister has said or even hinted at leads me to believe that they are taking a close look at this industry and are going to hopefully make some positive changes. So I think that's good. Quebec establishes, oh, this goes to Anna's question. Quebec establishes its own cost of living threshold and has continued to raise this threshold periodically. Okay, so I guess they're doing... Quebec has been actually keeping up with this a little bit more. The new financial guidelines are also being applied to the SDS, the special study permit application available to residents of 14 countries that require additional upfront information. So I think that makes sense as well, right? Great. Yeah, so this is kind of everything I wanted to cover on that topic. If you guys have any thoughts, comments, by all means, feel free to throw them in the chat. Do you think it was a good move by IRCC? Do you not think it was a good move? What do you think is going to happen? Excuse me. Oh my goodness, moving forward. I guess only time will tell. So lastly, before we wrap up for the show, quick sip, of course, for the segue. I'll call it the segue sip. Quick update on the Visto side. So for those of you who don't know, Visto is a Canadian immigration platform. It is a platform for Canadian immigration professionals, right? So we don't actually provide software direct to aspiring immigrants. Our software is used by immigration law firms, immigration lawyers, immigration consultants, study abroad agents, stuff like that. So if you are interested in automating some of those processes, definitely check us out at Visto.ai. We've had some big features launched in the last month, especially since I've been gone. A new application builder, so you can go in, your firm can go in, build any application that you'd like, custom document checklists and intake forms and stuff like that, just to kind of make it easier to support any application that you might be working on. We've also got some big features in the works. I'm not going to announce them today, probably save them for the new year, but we have some very cool AI stuff, especially in the works. I think I will be announcing it early January, right? So we're still hard at work. We got to do testing, we got to do improvements, we got to do beta testing with our users, right? The current firms that are using Visto will get access to all the fun stuff first. So that'll be fun. But stay tuned. I will be making some big announcements in January as we launch some new features, new capabilities, new AI. I'm very excited for that. And I think it will be a big 2024 for Visto, especially the way things are going right now and where the Canadian immigration industry is headed. I think it's a lot of fun times ahead. So anyways, that is it for me. That's all I wanted to talk about today. Thank you very much for tuning in. If there are any more questions from LinkedIn, feel free to throw them in the chat. If you're watching after the fact on YouTube, thank you. Make sure to like and subscribe if you don't mind. It really helps to support the channel, and so you don't miss future Visto shows. I go live every 2 weeks on LinkedIn. So if you're not watching this live, make sure you're following me on LinkedIn. And every second Thursday, I post the show ahead of time, so you can click on attending so that it sends you a notification when I go live, so that you can tune in when I go live. And it's more fun because then you can send messages, comments, thoughts, and I read them all, right? So anyways, so that's it for me. Again, thank you everybody for tuning in. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you have any thoughts, comments, or questions, or any topics you want me to cover in future shows, feel free to let me know. Have a great rest of your Friday if you are watching this live and or on a Friday by chance. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care, everybody. Have a good one.